The morning mist clung to the ancient oaks like whispered secrets as Princess Lyra made her way through the elderwood forest. Her bare feet moved silently across the moss-covered ground, each step guided by an instinct that ran deeper than memory. The other nobles at court called her wild, strange, different from what a princess should be. They whispered that she belonged more to the forest than to the marble halls of her father's castle. King Aldrich had tried everything to make his daughter conform to royal expectations. Dancing masters, etiquette teachers, marriage proposals from neighboring kingdoms, nothing worked. Lyra would slip away at dawn, drawn to the deep woods where she felt truly at home. The trees seemed to welcome her, their branches parting naturally to create paths only she could see. On this particular morning, something was different. The usual bird songs had fallen silent, replaced by an eerie stillness that made the hair on her arms stand up. Lyra paused beside a massive pine tree, its trunk scarred by what looked like claw marks. The gouges were too large for any bear or wildcat she knew. They ran deep into the bark, and, around them, the earth was scorched black. A low rumble echoed through the forest, so deep it seemed to come from the ground itself. Lyra's heart raced, but she didn't run. Instead, she followed the sound, pushing through a thicket of thorny bushes that caught at her simple dress. Her father would be furious if he saw the tears in the fabric, but she didn't care. Something important was happening, something that called to every fiber of her being. The sound grew louder as she climbed a rocky slope. At the top, she found herself at the edge of a hidden valley she had never seen before. Below her stretched a crater-like depression, its center dominated by a cave entrance that looked like a gaping wound in the mountainside. Smoke drifted from the opening, and the rumbling came again, unmistakably the sound of something massive and in pain. Lyra scrambled down the slope, ignoring the loose stones that clattered beneath her feet. As she approached the cave, she could smell something metallic and sharp blood, she realized with a start. Without thinking, she called out into the darkness. "Hello? Is someone hurt?" The rumbling stopped abruptly. For a moment, the silence was absolute. Then, from deep within the cave, came a voice that seemed to shake the very air around her. "Leave this place, human child. Death waits here." The voice was ancient, weary, filled with a pain that made Lyra's heart ache. She had never heard anything like it, yet somehow it felt familiar, as if she had been waiting her whole life to hear those words. "I'm not leaving," she said, stepping closer to the cave entrance. "You're hurt. Let me help." A sound that might have been laughter echoed from the depths. "Help? What could a small human do for one such as I?" "I don't know until I try," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My name is Lyra. What's yours?" Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, something began to emerge from the shadows of the cave. First came a massive head, scales the color of deep forest emeralds catching what little sunlight filtered down into the valley. Eyes like molten gold fixed on her, ancient and intelligent and filled with surprise. The dragon, for that's what it clearly was, moved carefully, favoring its left side. As more of its body became visible, Lyra could see the source of its pain. A spear, ornately decorated with royal crests she recognized as her father's, was lodged deep in the creature's flank. Blood, black as midnight, stained the ground beneath it. By the old magic, the dragon whispered, its great head lowering until it was level with Lyra's face. "You are not afraid. Should I be?" Lyra asked, reaching out slowly to touch the dragon's snout. The scales were warm beneath her fingers, and she could feel the rapid beating of a massive heart. "Most humans flee at the sight of me. Others come with spears and swords, seeking glory." The dragon's eyes narrowed as it studied her face. "But, you are different. I can smell the old blood in your veins, child of two worlds." Lyra frowned. "I don't understand. I'm just Princess Lyra of Aldenmore." "Just?" The dragon made that sound like laughter again. "Child, your mother was Elena Forestborn, was she not? The woman your father found wandering the deep woods with no memory of her past?" Lyra's breath caught. Her mother had died when she was very young, and her father rarely spoke of her. But she had heard whispers, rumors about Queen Elena's mysterious origins, and her strange connection to the natural world. "How do you know about my mother?" "Because I knew her," the dragon said gently. "She was my friend, my companion, before she chose to forget and live as a human. She was the last of the forest folk, the bridge between our peoples. And, now that blood runs in your veins." The world seemed to tilt around Lyra. Everything that had felt strange about her life suddenly made sense: her connection to the forest, her ability to understand the language of animals, her complete lack of interest in court life. She wasn't just different, she was something else entirely. "The spear," she said suddenly, focusing on the immediate problem. "We need to get it out." The dragon, she still didn't know his name, shook his massive head. "It is barbed with cold iron and blessed by human priests. If you remove it, I will die. If it stays, I will die slowly." "There has to be another way," Lyra insisted, moving closer to examine the wound. The spear shaft was as thick as her arm and decorated with runes she couldn't read. But, as she placed her hands on it, she felt something stir within her, a warmth that seemed to flow from her heart to her fingertips. "What is your name?" she asked, her hands still on the spear. "I am Thorn," the dragon replied. "Guardian of the Elderwood, last of my kind in these lands." "Thorn," Lyra repeated, and the name felt right on her tongue. "Trust me." She closed her eyes and let the strange warmth build within her. It felt like sunlight and fresh spring water, like the first green shoots of new growth breaking through winter snow. Power she had never known she possessed flowed through her hands and into the spear. The metal began to change. The cold iron grew warm, then hot, then began to dissolve like ice in summer. The runes flared once and went dark. Within moments, what had been a deadly weapon became nothing more than ash that the wind scattered across the valley floor. Thorn gasped, a sound like distant thunder. "Impossible. The old magic. I thought it was gone forever." Lyra opened her eyes and saw that the wound was already beginning to heal, new scales growing to cover the damaged flesh. She felt drained but exhilarated, as if she had just discovered a part of herself that had been sleeping her whole life. "My mother," she said. "She could do this too?" "Elena was powerful, yes. But what you just did." Thorn struggled to his feet, testing his weight on the formerly injured side. "That required power beyond what any single forest folk possessed. You are something new, child. Something the old prophecies spoke of but we thought would never come to pass." Before Lyra could ask what he meant, the sound of horns echoed across the valley. She turned to see riders cresting the hill she had descended, their armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. At their head rode a figure she recognized with a sinking heart: Sir Marcus, captain of her father's guard. "Princess Lyra!" Marcus called as he spotted her. "Step away from the beast. We've tracked it here to finish what we started." Thorn growled, a sound that made the horses rear and dance nervously. "They came at dawn," he said to Lyra in a voice too low for the humans to hear. "A hunting party, seeking sport. I defended myself, nothing more." Lyra looked at the assembled knights, then at Thorn, and felt something crystallize inside her chest. All her life, she had been caught between two worlds: the human court where she never quite fit, and the forest where she felt at home but always alone. Now, for the first time, she had found someone who bridged both worlds, someone who knew the truth about her mother and could help her understand what she was becoming. "Go," she whispered to Thorn. "Fly deep into the forest. Find the old places where humans don't go. And leave you to face their questions alone?" Lyra smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like her mother had at the same age, wild and beautiful and utterly unafraid. "I'm done with their questions. I'm done pretending to be something I'm not." She turned to face the knights, raising her voice so it carried clearly across the valley. "Sir Marcus, the dragon is under my protection. Any who would harm him must answer to me." Marcus urged his horse closer, his face a mask of confusion and concern. "Your Highness, you don't understand. This creature is dangerous. It attacked our hunting party unprovoked." "Liar," Lyra said simply, and the word carried such conviction that several of the knights shifted uneasily in their saddles. You hunted him for sport, and he defended himself. That is his right. Behind her, she heard the great sweep of wings as Thorn took to the sky. She didn't turn to watch him go, but she felt his presence like a warm hand on her shoulder, and she knew this wasn't goodbye. Princess, Marcus said, dismounting and approaching her carefully as if she might bolt like a frightened deer. Your father is worried sick. You've been gone since dawn, and when we found the dragon's trail leading this way. He gestured helplessly at the charred ground around the cave. Tell my father I'll return when I'm ready, Lyra said, backing toward the tree line. And tell him that if any harm comes to the dragon or any other creature of this forest, he'll answer to me personally. She melted into the trees before Marcus could respond, using paths only she knew to disappear completely. Behind her, she heard him calling her name, but she didn't look back. She had spent 18 years trying to be the princess everyone wanted her to be. Now it was time to discover who she truly was. As she ran through the familiar woods, Lyra felt a new presence in her mind, warm, ancient, and completely loyal. Somewhere in the deep forest, Thorn was waiting for her, ready to teach her about the world she had inherited from her mother and the power that was awakening within her blood. The old life was over. The real adventure was just beginning. And, though she didn't know it yet, the choices she had made this day would determine the fate of both the human kingdom and the ancient magic that still lived in the heart of the forest. The sun was setting by the time she reached the ancient grove where her mother used to bring her as a child. As if summoned by her thoughts, Thorn landed in the clearing, his massive form somehow managing to move with surprising grace among the towering trees. You came, he said, and there was something like wonder in his ancient voice. I promised I would, Lyra replied, settling onto a fallen log that seemed placed there specifically for their meeting. Now tell me everything. About my mother, about the forest folk, about what I'm becoming. Thorn settled himself across from her, his golden eyes reflecting the last light of day. It is a long story, child. And, once you hear it, there will be no going back to the life you knew. Lyra looked around at the grove where she had always felt most at peace, then, back at the dragon who had already become the most important thing in her world. Good, she said simply. I never wanted that life anyway. As the stars began to appear through the canopy above them, Thorn began to speak, his voice weaving a tale of ancient magic, forgotten peoples, and a destiny that had been waiting 18 years to unfold. 3 weeks had passed since Lyra disappeared into the forest, and King Aldrich was growing desperate. Search parties returned empty-handed, reporting only glimpses of a figure that vanished like smoke among the trees. The castle buzzed with rumors. Some said she had been devoured by the dragon, others whispered that she had gone mad and was living wild in the woods like some feral creature. But Lyra had never been more alive. Deep in the heart of the elderwood, where the trees grew so tall and thick that sunlight barely touched the forest floor, she was learning to embrace her true nature. Thorn had led her to places that existed on no map, groves where time moved differently and the boundary between the physical and magical worlds grew thin. Feel the life force around you, Thorn instructed as they stood beside a crystal-clear stream that seemed to sing with its own voice. Don't try to control it. Simply let it flow through you. Lyra closed her eyes and extended her senses as he had taught her. Immediately, she was overwhelmed by the sheer vitality of the forest. Every tree, every flower, every tiny insect hummed with its own unique energy. She could feel the slow, ancient thoughts of the oaks, the quick darting consciousness of squirrels, the patient wisdom of stones that had watched the world change for millennia. I can feel everything, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. How did I never notice this before? Because you were taught to ignore it, Thorn replied gently. Human society fears what it cannot understand, so it teaches its children to close their hearts to the deeper magic of the world. But you are not fully human, Lyra. Your mother's blood gives you the ability to bridge both realms. Over the past weeks, Thorn had shared the true history of the land. Long ago, humans and the magical folk had lived in harmony. The forest folk, Lyra's mother's people, had served as mediators between the human kingdoms and the ancient spirits that dwelt in wild places. They could speak to dragons, negotiate with water spirits, and channel the raw life force of nature itself. But, as human civilization grew, fear replaced wonder. The magical creatures were driven into hiding, the forest folk hunted to extinction. Elena had been the last, and, when she fell in love with King Aldrich, she had chosen to suppress her true nature and live as a human queen. She gave up everything for love, Lyra said one evening as they sat by a fire that needed no wood, its flames dancing blue and green in the darkness. How could she bear it? Love makes us capable of great sacrifices, Thorn replied, his ancient eyes reflecting the magical fire. But it also demanded a price. Your mother grew weaker each year she denied her nature. Her death was not from human illness, but from the slow fading that comes when one of the folk is cut off from the source of their power. This knowledge filled Lyra with a deep sadness, but also with determination. Her mother had died because she tried to live as something she wasn't. Lyra would not make the same mistake. Her training progressed rapidly. Within days, she could communicate with any creature of the forest. The wolves brought her news from distant parts of the kingdom, while hawks served as her eyes in the sky. She learned to heal injured animals with a touch, to encourage plants to grow, and to sense the health of the forest itself. But it was her bond with Thorn that grew strongest of all. Dragons, she learned, chose their companions carefully. The connection between them was deeper than friendship, deeper even than family. They were two parts of a greater whole, each making the other more than they could be alone. In the old days, Thorn explained as they flew together high above the forest canopy, Lyra riding securely between his shoulder blades, every great dragon lord had a human companion. We were partners in protecting the balance between civilization and wild nature. But, when the humans turned against magic, most of the bonds were broken. I have been alone for 3 centuries, Lyra. You have given me back a piece of my soul I thought was lost forever. Their peaceful training came to an abrupt end when a young deer burst into their grove, bleeding from wounds that could only have been made by human weapons. Lyra immediately knelt beside the creature, her hands glowing with healing light. What happened? She asked in the deer's own language. Hunters, the deer gasped. But not hunting for food. They carry nets and cages. They seek the old places, the sacred groves. They destroy everything they find. Thorn's growl shook the leaves from nearby trees. Sir Marcus and his men. They're not just looking for you anymore, Lyra. They're trying to flush you out by attacking the forest itself. Through her network of animal allies, Lyra quickly learned the full extent of the destruction. Acting on King Aldrich's desperate orders, the hunting parties had begun a systematic assault on the deeper parts of the forest. Ancient shrines were torn down, sacred springs were poisoned, and any creature that seemed touched by magic was captured or killed. They don't understand what they're doing, Lyra said, her voice tight with anger and grief. The forest isn't just trees and animals. It's a living system. Destroy the magic that binds it together, and the whole kingdom will suffer. She was right. Already, farmers on the kingdom's borders were reporting failed crops and dying livestock. The rivers that flowed from the forest were becoming sluggish and murky. Without the ancient magic to maintain the natural balance, the land itself was beginning to sicken. I have to stop this, Lyra declared, rising from where she knelt beside the now-healed deer. I can't hide here while everything my mother loved is destroyed. And how do you propose to stop an army? Thorn asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. By showing them what they're truly fighting, Lyra replied. My father is a good man, but he's acting out of fear and ignorance. If I can make him understand what's at stake. The risk is enormous, Thorn warned. If they capture you, they might try to use you against me. And, if your father refuses to listen, you could find yourself declared an enemy of the very kingdom you're trying to save. Lyra looked around at the grove that had become her sanctuary, then, up at the dragon who had become her dearest friend and truest companion. Some things are worth the risk. That night, she sent messages through the forest network, calling every creature touched by the old magic to a gathering in the heart of the Elderwood. They came by the hundreds, not just forest animals, but beings that most humans thought were mere legend. Tree spirits with bark for skin and leaves for hair emerged from their ancient oaks. Water nymphs rose from hidden pools, their forms shifting like liquid moonlight. Even a few surviving unicorns stepped delicately from shadows so deep they seemed like doorways to another world. Lyra stood before them all, her simple dress replaced by a gown that seemed woven from starlight and forest mist, a gift from the spirits themselves. Power radiated from her small form, the awakened blood of the forest folk making her something more than human but not quite ready to leave humanity behind entirely. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the magical clearing. "My kingdom is at war with itself, destroying the very foundations of its prosperity out of fear and misunderstanding. But I believe there is still hope for peace between our peoples, as there was in the ancient days." An elderly unicorn, his horns silver with age, stepped forward. "The humans have made their choice, daughter of Elena. They seek to remake the world in their own image, with no room for wonder or magic. Why should we not simply withdraw to the deep places and let them face the consequences of their folly?" "Because withdrawal is not protection," Lyra replied. "Without the forest's magic, the kingdom will fall into disease and famine. Innocent people will suffer for the mistakes of their leaders. And, eventually, the destruction will reach even the deepest groves. There will be nowhere left to hide." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. These beings had lived through the gradual retreat of magic from the world, the steady shrinking of the wild places they called home. They knew she spoke the truth. "What do you propose?" asked a tree spirit whose voice sounded like wine through autumn leaves. "A demonstration," Lyra said. "Not of our power to destroy, but of our power to heal and protect. Tomorrow, Sir Marcus plans to assault the grove of First Spring, where the kingdom's greatest river begins. If that sacred place is destroyed, the river will die, and, with it the farmlands that feed half the kingdom." She gestured to Thorn, who had remained silent but watchful throughout the gathering. "We will stop them, but not through violence. We will show them what they're truly destroying, and hope that understanding breeds wisdom." The plan was audacious. As dawn broke over the forest, Lyra and Thorn flew toward the grove of First Spring, where Sir Marcus had indeed gathered a force of 50 men. They had brought axes, saws, and barrels of what Lyra recognized as a corrosive alchemical mixture designed to poison the spring itself. The grove was a place of incredible beauty, where the first trickle of the kingdom's greatest river emerged from a pool so clear it seemed like liquid crystal. Ancient willows drooped their branches into the water, their roots intertwined with stone formations that pulse with soft, natural light. "It ends here," Sir Marcus was saying to his men as Lyra and Thorn descended silently into the treetops above them. "Whatever dark magic has claimed our princess dwells in this place. We destroy it, and we break the spell that holds her." Lyra felt her heart break a little at the genuine concern in the knight's voice. He truly believed he was rescuing her from some evil enchantment. If only she could make him understand that the magic he feared was not her captor, but her birthright. She dropped from Thorn's back onto the forest floor, appearing among the soldiers like a figure from legend. Her gown seemed to shift and flow with its own wind, and her hair moved as if she were underwater. The power she had awakened blazed around her like visible light, and several of the men dropped their weapons in shock. "Sir Marcus," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the grove. "You have come far from home." The knight captain recovered quickly, drawing his sword but making no move to advance. "Princess Lyra. Thank the gods you're alive. Stand clear, your highness. We've come to destroy the source of the corruption that has taken hold of you." "Corruption?" Lyra laughed, and the sound was like water over stones. "Look around you, Marcus. Look with your eyes, not your fears." As she spoke, she released just a fraction of her power into the grove. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. The pool began to glow with soft, golden light, and the water that flowed from it sparkled like liquid diamonds. The willows straightened and bloomed, despite the fact that it was late summer. Flowers erupted from the ground in waves of color, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with vitality. Several of the soldiers dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the beauty and peace that suddenly filled the clearing. But Sir Marcus held his ground, though his sword hand shook. "Sorcery," he whispered. "Dark magic meant to bewitch and control." "Is this what you call dark?" Lyra asked, kneeling beside a wounded sparrow that had fallen near the pool. She cupped it in her hands, and a moment later it flew away, its wing completely healed. "Is the power to heal corruption?" Is the ability to bring life and growth something evil? For a moment, she thought she had reached him. Sir Marcus lowered his sword slightly, his face reflecting confusion and wonder. But then, the sound of approaching hooves shattered the moment, and King Aldrich himself rode into the grove at the head of another company of soldiers. The king looked older than Lyra remembered, his face haggard with sleepless nights and worry. But his eyes blazed with the same determination that had built his kingdom, and she knew that her most difficult battle was about to begin. "Lyra," he said, dismounting and approaching her with the careful steps of a man walking toward a dangerous predator. "My daughter. What have they done to you?" "No one has done anything to me, father," she replied, not moving from where she stood beside the magical spring. "I've simply learned who I truly am." King Aldrich's face went pale. "Elena," he whispered, as if seeing a ghost. "You look just like your mother did when I first found her." "Because I am my mother's daughter," Lyra said gently. "In every way that matters." The king's expression hardened. "Your mother chose humanity. She chose love over magic, civilization over wilderness. She chose me. And it killed her," Lyra replied, the words hitting her father like physical blows. "Every year she denied her nature, she grew weaker. She died because she tried to be something she wasn't, father. I won't make the same mistake." Above them, Thorn circled silently, ready to intervene if the soldiers made any threatening moves toward Lyra. But she had made him promise to remain hidden unless her life was truly in danger. This confrontation could only be resolved through words and understanding, not force. King Aldrich drew his own sword, though his hand trembled as he pointed it toward his daughter. "You will come home, Lyra. You will resume your duties as princess of this realm. I will not lose you to the same madness that claimed your mother." "Madness?" Lyra's power flared, and every flower in the grove bloomed simultaneously. "Father, look around you. Look at what this madness can accomplish. The kingdom is dying because you're destroying the very magic that sustains it. I could heal the poisoned rivers, restore the failing crops, bring back the abundance this land once knew. All I ask is acceptance." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other across a gulf that seemed wider than any physical distance. Behind the king, Sir Marcus and his men waited for orders, while the grove itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, King Aldrich raised his sword higher, and Lyra knew that words would not be enough. The sword in King Aldrich's hand caught the sunlight filtering through the grove, its polished steel a stark contrast to the soft, natural magic that surrounded them. Lyra could see her own reflection in the blade, distorted and fragmented, and realized it was a perfect metaphor for how her father saw her now, not as his beloved daughter, but as something broken that needed to be fixed. "I give you one last chance," the king said, his voice heavy with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Come home willingly, renounce this dark path you've chosen, and you can resume your place in the kingdom. Continue this rebellion, and you will be declared a traitor to the crown." Around the grove, the assembled soldiers shifted nervously. Many of them had known Lyra since she was a child, had watched her grow from a curious, wild-haired girl into the young woman who now stood before them radiating power they couldn't understand. The conflict between loyalty to their king and their affection for his daughter was written plainly on their faces. "I am not a traitor, father," Lyra said softly. "I am exactly what you raised me to be, someone who puts the welfare of our people above personal comfort. But you cannot see that the kingdom's true enemy is ignorance, not magic." As if to prove her point, a rumble of distant thunder echoed across the sky, though no clouds were visible. The sound came again, closer this time, and Lyra felt her heart sink as she recognized what it meant. Through her connection to the forest network, animals throughout the Elderwood were crying out in alarm. "What have you done?" she whispered, staring at her father in growing horror. Sir Marcus stepped forward, his face grim but satisfied. "We learned from our failure to capture you, princess. While we kept you talking here, other companies have been setting fires throughout the forest. If you will not come willingly, we will force you out by destroying your sanctuary entirely." The smell of smoke was already beginning to drift through the grove, carried on a wind that felt wrong, tainted with the scent of burning magic and dying dreams. Somewhere in the distance, Lyra could hear the terrified calls of creatures fleeing the advancing flames. "You're burning the forest?" Lyra's voice rose to a cry that echoed strangely in the magical clearing. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The Elderwood isn't just trees, it's the heart that pumps life through the entire kingdom. Without it, everything will die." "Better a dead forest than one corrupted by dark magic," King Aldrich replied, though his face had gone pale at his daughter's obvious distress. "The land can be replanted. New trees will grow without the taint that has claimed these ancient ones." "Hundreds of years," Lyra sobbed, falling to her knees beside the spring. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel each tree as it caught fire, each dying animal, each spirit that fled deeper into hiding or simply faded away. It took hundreds of years for this magic to grow and settle. "You can't just replant it." Above them, Thorn's roar shattered the air as he finally abandoned his hiding place and descended into the grove. Soldiers scattered as the great dragon landed between Lyra and her father, his eyes blazing with fury. "Enough!" Thorn's voice boomed through the clearing. "You would destroy in hours what took centuries to build. You would murder an entire realm of life because you are too proud to admit you were wrong." King Aldrich raised his sword toward the dragon, though the weapon looked pitifully small against Thorn's massive form. "Stand aside, beast. This is between me and my daughter." "Your daughter?" Thorn laughed bitterly. "You have no daughter, Aldrich of Aldenmore. You have only your fear and your stubborn refusal to accept that some things are beyond your control." The dragon's words hit their mark. King Aldrich staggered backward as if physically struck, and, for a moment, his careful composure cracked. In that instant, Lyra saw not the stern monarch but the frightened father who had watched his wife fade away and was now terrified of losing his daughter to the same mysterious force. But, before she could speak, another sound cut through the air, the desperate crying of a child. Through the trees came a young peasant boy, no more than 8 years old, running as fast as his legs could carry him. His clothes were singed, and tears streamed down his smoke-blackened face. "Please," the boy gasped, falling at King Aldrich's feet. "Please, your majesty. The fires have reached our village. My little sister is trapped in our house, and the flames are everywhere. The well has gone dry, and we have no way to fight the blaze." Sir Marcus stepped forward, his hand on his sword. "How did this child get past our perimeter?" "I ran through the forest," the boy sobbed. "All the animals are fleeing this way. They showed me safe paths through the flames. Please, my sister will die if someone doesn't help." Lyra rose to her feet, power beginning to gather around her like a visible aura. "I can save her. I can save all of them." "No," King Aldrich said sharply. "This is exactly what the enemy wants, to use our compassion against us. The child is likely part of some elaborate deception." "A deception?" Lyra stared at her father in disbelief. "This is an 8-year-old boy whose sister is about to burn to death, and you think it's a trick?" She turned to the child, kneeling so she was at his eye level. "What's your name?" "Tam," the boy whispered. "And my sister is Rosie. She's only 4, and she's hiding under our bed because she's scared of the fire." Through her connection to the forest, Lyra could sense the truth of his words. The flames were indeed approaching a small village on the forest's edge, and a terrified little girl was trapped exactly where Tam described. The fire moved faster than any natural blaze, fed by the magical energies that were being violently disrupted by its passage. "I'm going to help them," Lyra announced, standing and facing her father directly. "You can stop me if you want, but you'll have to go through Thorn to do it." "And me as well," said a new voice. Sir Marcus stepped past the king, removing his helmet and letting it fall to the ground. "Your Majesty, I've served your family for 20 years. I've seen Princess Lyra grow from a child into a woman of courage and compassion. If she says she can save lives, then, by all the gods, I'm going to let her try." Several other soldiers moved to stand beside their captain, their faces reflecting the same internal struggle he had just resolved. They were sworn to obey their king, but they were also human beings who couldn't stand by while innocent children died. King Aldrich looked around the grove, seeing his authority crumbling in the face of his daughter's moral certainty. And if I forbid it? If I order you all to stand down? Then, you'll be ordering us to let children die to preserve your pride, Sir Marcus replied quietly. And that's an order I cannot follow. The king's face went through a series of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, and, finally, a dawning recognition of what his fear had nearly driven him to become. He lowered his sword, the blade dropping to point at the ground. Go, he whispered to Lyra. Save them if you can. Lyra didn't waste time with thanks. She leaped onto Thorn's back, and they rose into the sky with powerful beats of the dragon's wings. From the air, the devastation was even worse than she had feared. Great swaths of the forest were already consumed, and the fires were spreading faster than any natural flame should move. But she could also see the pattern behind the chaos. The fires weren't random, they were following the old magical pathways that connected the forest's various groves and sacred places. Someone with knowledge of the old ways was directing the destruction, targeting the very heart of the land's magic. There, Thorn called, pointing with his great head toward a column of smoke rising from the forest's edge. The village. They dove toward the settlement, a cluster of perhaps 20 houses surrounded by small farms. Most of the buildings were already abandoned, their inhabitants having fled when the fire approached. But one house still showed signs of life, a small cottage where Lyra could see a little girl's face pressed against an upstairs window. The building was surrounded by flames on 3 sides, and the fire was closing in fast. Even as they watched, sparks began catching on the thatched roof. Can you land? Lyra asked. Not safely, Thorn replied. The heat is too intense. Then, get me as close as you can. Thorn swooped low, and Lyra jumped from his back onto the roof of the burning cottage. The thatch was hot under her feet, and she could hear the little girl crying inside. She pressed her hands against the roof and felt for the child's exact location, then called upon every bit of power she possessed. Magic flowed through her like a river of light, but instead of destruction, she shaped it into protection. A sphere of cool, breathable air formed around the little girl, while barriers of pure force held back the advancing flames. Lyra tore through the roof with her bare hands, the magical energy protecting her from the heat, and dropped into the cottage. Rosie was exactly where her brother had said she would be, huddled under a small bed with her arms wrapped around a ragdoll. She looked up at Lyra with wide, frightened eyes. Are you an angel? The little girl whispered. Something like that, Lyra smiled, gathering the child into her arms. Let's get you back to your brother. The return flight was even more dangerous, as the fires had spread further during their rescue. But Thorn navigated the smoke and flame with the skill of his ancient years, and soon they were landing back in the grove where King Aldrich and his soldiers waited. Tam cried out with relief as Lyra set his sister down safely, and the little girl ran to him with tears streaming down her face. Around the grove, hardened soldiers found themselves wiping their eyes as they witnessed the reunion. But there was no time for celebration. The fires were still spreading, and now Lyra could sense something else, a dark presence moving through the flames, something that fed on destruction and chaos. The fires weren't just consuming the forest, they were being guided by malevolent intelligence. Father, she said urgently, turning to King Aldrich. The fires aren't natural. Someone is controlling them, using them to destroy the magical bonds that hold the land together. If we don't stop this now, the damage won't be limited to the forest. The corruption will spread throughout the kingdom. King Aldrich studied his daughter's face, seeing there the same determination that had made her mother remarkable. Finally, he sheathed his sword. What do you need? The question was simple, but it represented a complete reversal of everything he had believed. Lyra felt tears start in her eyes as she realized her father was finally ready to trust her. I need you to call back your soldiers, she said. All of them. And I need you to trust me to do what I was born to do. The king nodded slowly, then turned to Sir Marcus. Signal the withdrawal. All units are to pull back to the forest's edge immediately. As horns sounded across the burning woodland, Lyra closed her eyes and reached out through her connection to every living thing in the Elderwood. What she found broke her heart: thousands of creatures fleeing in terror, ancient spirits fading as their homes were destroyed, and, beneath it all, a spreading corruption that threatened to poison the very roots of the world. But she also found something else. Deep in the forest's heart, where the oldest trees grew and the strongest magic lived, other powers were stirring. The spirits hadn't all fled, some were gathering their strength for a final defense. They were waiting for someone to unite them, to give them direction and purpose. "Thorn," she said, opening her eyes. "Take me to the Heart Grove." "That's where this ends." The dragon nodded grimly. He understood what she was planning, and he knew the cost it would exact. But he also knew that some prices were worth paying. As they rose into the sky once more, King Aldrich watched his daughter disappear into the smoke and flame. For the first time since Elena's death, he allowed himself to hope that love might be stronger than fear, and that his daughter might succeed where he had failed. In the Heart Grove, where the first tree in the forest had taken root thousands of years ago, Lyra faced the true enemy at last. It wasn't human, it was something older and far more dangerous, a creature of shadow and malice that had been sleeping beneath the earth until the magical disruption had awakened it. The battle that followed would become legend, sung in songs for generations to come. But, in the moment, it was simply a choice between love and fear, between the courage to grow and the safety of staying small. When the sun rose the next morning, the fires were out. The forest was scarred but alive, its magic wounded but not destroyed. And, in the royal palace, King Aldrich signed a decree that would change everything, a charter recognizing the rights of all magical creatures within his realm, and establishing his daughter as the first official ambassador between the human kingdom and the ancient powers of the wild. Lyra never did return to live in the palace full-time. But she visited often, and she was always accompanied by a great green dragon whose wisdom helped guide the kingdom into a new age of understanding. Together, they proved that sometimes the most important battles are not won with swords, but with the courage to choose love over fear, and truth over comfortable illusion. The forest flourished under their protection, and the kingdom prospered as it never had before. Children grew up hearing stories of the forest princess and her faithful dragon, and many of them would venture into the woods hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary pair. Sometimes, if they were very lucky and very kind, they did.